Welcome to another episode of Voices. I'm your host, Keston Jones. Visionaries offering information with clarity, expertise, and substance. We are content experts. Let your voice be heard. Welcome to another episode of Voices. I'm your host, Keston Jones, and with me we have a very special guest, Miss Jodi Morales.
Hi.
How are you doing, Jodi?
I'm doing well. Nice to see you.
Man, great to have you on the show. And,
Thank you.
And like I said, Voices is a show for people who are doing great work throughout the community. And, you know, you and I, we've known each other for about 5 years now.
Yes.
Way back for our work, well, we both worked at the Bronx Defenders. Now that you're an entrepreneur, you now have founded the Law Office of Jodi Morales.
Yes.
So I really felt like it was a good opportunity to have you come on the show to talk about your work, but also talk about your journey as a Latina woman, someone who is from the community, and oftentimes you're asked to defend individuals who look like you.
Yes.
So I felt it would be great for the viewers to find out personally how or what goes into actually litigating with some of these cases yourself, who primarily focuses on criminal law. You also do appeals as well as some civil litigation. So again, thank you for agreeing to be on the show.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
How you feeling today?
I feel fantastic. I'm happy to be here to see you after so long and to talk about the things that I'm passionate about, which I know overlap with the things that you are passionate about.
Okay, so I guess without further ado, tell me about yourself, about your upbringing, and what led you to want to become an attorney, based on some of the things, some of the factors in your life and things of that nature.
So I was very fortunate to be born into a family, both immediate and extended, that values hard work and determination and education. My grandparents came to New York City in 1946 from Puerto Rico without much of a plan, other than that they wanted to see their young family do well and grow and flourish. At the time, my mother was about 3 months old and my uncle was about 3 years old. And so they sold their house. They sold their house in order to afford the 4 tickets to get on board the ship that would bring them here. And at the end of, buying those tickets, they had about $17 left in their pockets to make something work, to make something stick. And, there was a lot of fear, a lot of trepidation about it, but they never let that get in the way of them really trying to push forward and make their family the best that they could be. My grandfather was a merchant marine, so he had traveled a little bit and had seen, different people, different cultures, heard different languages spoken. But my grandmother, who had not more than a 5th grade education and never left the island, really did come here with a lot of fear in her heart. And she always talked about the moment when she arrived, when she got off that ship and felt the cold and saw the snow and was like, what have I gotten myself into? But she was an incredibly resourceful woman and a very strong-willed woman who taught herself how to speak English by going to the grocery store and pointing at things and asking people to teach her what those words were. And those are some of the lessons and some of the things that were passed down to myself, my mom, my uncle, my brother, some of the lessons that really have propelled me and put me in the place that I am in right now.
Absolutely.
My mother was a single mother and, unfortunately didn't have a lot of financial support from my father. So she found herself in family court a lot of times trying to get custody and visitation and things of that nature settled with my dad, who was not very present. But the most significant factor was getting that child support, financial support. And I would often hear her talk about how difficult that was for her to navigate. And I remember being about 12 years old and asking her to bring me with her to family court. And my mom never shied away from exposing me to things that she thought would, open my eyes to the world. So she took me with her, and I remember walking into family court and looking at all the families and hearing crying babies and seeing people just at their worst.
Yeah.
And then we sat there for hours and hours and hours. And at the end of the day, nothing was accomplished. That was one of the most eye-opening experiences for me as a young person, and one of the reasons why I became interested in the law to begin with.
Yeah, great, and shout out to your family, and what you shared was a story of resiliency and not giving up. And especially in today's climate where there's a lot of talk of, especially from this administration, about people who come to this country for the American dream, and separating and distinguishing between certain people who come to this country and gratifying them and saying that they're great, and other people who come to this country. But when it's all said and done, this is a place that people can establish and realize their dreams, and it sounds like your family, your grandparents, your moms, everyone realized that, and you're an example of what can happen if you invest in the next generation.
Yes.
So really applaud your mother for instilling that in you, as well as your family. So that definitely is something that a lot of us have experienced, family court, especially people of color. And this show primarily is about elevating the voices of those who have lived experience. So after going through that, like you said, this was one of the main reasons why you wanted to pursue law. Can you talk about that journey to decide that you're going to become a lawyer? Like what did that look like from beginning to end?
So it's really interesting. I grew up in Harlem on 135th Street and Broadway, but I never went to school in my community because, to be frank, our schools were not doing very well.
Yeah.
And my mom recognized that immediately. So she kind of hustled our way into one of the best elementary schools in the country. And it was located on the Upper West Side. And I credit my time there with the exposure to many different types of people and many different types of communities that I wouldn't have been exposed to otherwise.
Yes.
And so, in addition to going to school there, my mother really did cultivate the creative aspects of me as well by enrolling me in dance classes. So I started dancing when I was 6 years old. I was a ballerina all the way until I turned 18. I was on scholarship at Alvin Ailey, at Ballet Hispanico. I went to LaGuardia High School of Performing Arts. And these are all things that I enjoyed because my mother understood that education was a little bit more than just academics. It really was enriching the academics by providing a place where you can learn artistry and creativity. And so those are the things that really did form the foundation for, I think, the way that I practice law and my self-discipline.
Yeah.
I stopped dancing when I was 18. I decided to go to college and just kind of pursue academics 100%. And I'm fine with that decision because I went to SUNY Buffalo and I loved every moment of being there.
Shout out to SUNY Buffalo.
Shout out to SUNY Buffalo. My professors were incredibly nurturing and helpful, particularly to someone who was not from the area. Buffalo's 8 hours away.
Yes.
Very, very different. I had not visited the school prior to accepting, being a student there. So I was very, very fortunate to have that experience. While I was a student at SUNY Buffalo, my junior year, I learned that I was pregnant. So I was about to turn 20 years old when I learned that. And that was a huge, huge life change, to say the least.
Yes.
And suddenly I found myself having to make a decision of whether I would come back to New York City to have the support of my family or whether I would kind of stick it through up in Buffalo. And I made the decision to stay, because I thought and I felt very confidently that I had everything that I needed to push forward. In fact, knowing that there was another life coming that I was responsible for was kind of like the biggest motivator. And so, you know, I stuck with it, and my son was born during my senior year, and I graduated, and he was there at my graduation, which was a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I credit him with my decision to move forward and go to law school.
To law school?
Yes, to law school. And so I took a year off between college to work, to, you know, I don't know, I just needed a break. But then I ultimately went to law school. And law school for me was very different than undergrad. I was the minority like twice or 3 times over. I was a mom, I was a woman, and I was a Latina. And I was the only Latina in my section of 50 plus students. So it was very hard for me to feel like I was part of the community there. And I did struggle academically.
And do you feel that the academic struggle was based on your inability to pick the information up, or was it a number of other factors? And the reason why I'm asking that is because many students of color may not perform well academically, and it's this assumption that it's because we lack the ability to grasp the information. And what I've found is research based on, you know, needs not being met in other areas or other external factors that may contribute to someone's ability to retain information or to be present when they need to be in this particular setting.
Yeah, I mean, I was an honors student in college. I was on the dean's list. I had a 4.0 GPA my last year, the entirety of my last year. And so when I went to law school, I just kind of assumed that I would excel academically, but I found that, you know, not only was it difficult to manage the workload, because first year of law school is extremely difficult, but I also was raising a toddler. And unfortunately, I did not have the support from certain administrators and teachers that I thought I deserved. And so I believe that my inability to excel academically my first year was in large part because of that. Not because I was unable to handle the material. I just didn't have the time to devote to the work as much as everyone else did. So I ended up actually making the decision early on in my first year to drop down from a full-time student to a part-time student, which meant that my first year extended over 2 semesters and then included the summer. And that was more manageable. And that was the way in which I was able to make it through. You know, I mean, additionally, and I referenced my family earlier, but it's important to talk about my brother, my older brother, who saw how hard I was struggling and saw that I was on the brink of like quitting because I really was just like, I can't do this. And he took me to the side and was like, no, like you can do this. You have everything within you to do this. This is not how you were raised. You do not give up. And, you know, hearing those words really did make all the difference. And I stuck through, and I wasn't the most academically gifted person throughout law school, but I made it through and I graduated, and I'm an attorney today.
Absolutely. Shout out to your brother. Shout out to your family. And I think that that's why it's important for us to empower families and support families, because when it's all said and done, that's who many of our children, many of our students, many of us have to fall back on.
That's right.
And that's why my work will continue to help to empower families, to recognize that you know, we need to work together as opposed to being apart. So you're an attorney.
Yes.
And you and I met during your time at the Bronx Offenders, my time at the Bronx Offenders. Can you talk about that particular time where you were an attorney there, and how did you feel in terms of the duality of being a Latina, a woman who is from a community of color and who is often responsible for you know, representing people of color in the criminal court setting?
Yeah. So when I first started working at the Bronx Defenders, I didn't know much about the community, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I remember during some orientation hearing that the office sat within the poorest congressional district in the United States.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing that fact and thinking, this can't be true. We live in New York City. If you take the 4 train at 161st and River Avenue downtown, even like 5 minutes, you're in an area where there's lots of affluence, there's lots of money,
Yeah.
there's abundance. How is this true? And that's when I really started to realize like how important it was for somebody like me who speaks Spanish, who looks like the people who are coming in and out of those doors on a daily basis to do this work. And, you know, it really was the reason why I stuck in being a public defender for 10 plus years. Most people do not do public defense work for that long.
Yeah.
It's grueling. It's thankless at times. You know, you do feel like you're not making much of an impact when, for example, you see the same client you represented at year 3 come before you at year 5 and then again at year 8.
Yeah.
You know, but it was that statistic and watching daily how much people were oppressed by this system that gave me the strength to keep moving on within that practice and being a public defender.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and I found that the work was as grueling as you would say. You're saying, especially in seeing as a man of color, seeing how many men were impacted by the work as well. And one of the things that I always took with me was those small victories, those times when families would come back to us. And I know you have plenty of those stories where they would say, thank you, we really appreciate you. Had it not been for your advocacy, we don't know what would have happened.
Right.
And I think that oftentimes, especially you hear the term public defender, many of our clients may assume that this person does not have this, may not have, what's the word I'm looking for?
The skill set,
the skill set or the knowledge or the
Mm-hmm.
desire to
Right.
work hard for them.
Right.
And one of the things that I felt about the majority of the attorneys of the Bronx offenders is that we did work hard for our clients. So, you know, you mentioned another role that you had as a mother. How has that impacted your work, being that you have sons and you live in the community and what you know of the law and how individuals are easily ensnared by the law? How has that affected you?
So it's interesting. Shortly before I left the Bronx Defenders, I was invited to join their adolescent defense project. And I mean, as you can tell by the name, it's primarily tasked with the job of like representing adolescents who are charged with crimes in adult court. And what I found, even though I knew this, what I found in practice was that most of the people coming before me were 16-year-old boys who were either Black or Latino. And as the mother of a 16-year-old Puerto Rican boy being raised in the Bronx, it really broke my heart that this was the demographic that was being, you know, I mean, for lack of a better phrase, oppressed by a system that really isn't designed to understand how difficult it is to be a young person of color living in a marginalized neighborhood. And so, you know, I took my experiences as Marco's mom to my practice. And what I found was that so much of my work being within this project was, I mean, in a sense, obviously, advocating on behalf of my client, but also helping the family, which most of the time was a single mom of color, understand what was happening with her child, what she could expect, and how we could all work together to make things better. And you know, in having those conversations with women who looked like me, who were going through this, I realized that it was really important for me to impart upon my sons how they could be community givers, how they could be more active in helping their peers deal with some of the pressures of, you know, being targeted, of, you know, dealing with just regular teenage things. And really just like it gave me the strength to say that there are times in which I have to, as a mother, do my job to make sure that they're growing up to be as productive as my family members, as I have strived to be.
Absolutely. And speaking of strength and having this strength, at some point you realized that it was important for you to branch out on your own. So can you talk about what went into your decision for wanting to branch out on your own? And what have you learned about yourself, about this work, since you've branched out on your own to start the law offices of Jodi Morales?
So there's a lot that I can say, but you know, even though, and I always look at things like from a micro level and then macro level, but even though Latinos are a growing population in this country, we are grossly underrepresented in the law, right? So I think as of 2017, Latinos comprised like 18% of the US population. But in terms of practicing law, it was only 4% of Latinos that were represented. And then that number is even smaller when you think about Latinas. We comprise only 2% of the population of practitioners in this country. And that's a huge problem, right? Because if the change makers, if the advocates are not reflective of the populace, then we continue to have the same problems of racial discrimination, ethnic discrimination, and financial discrimination. And by financial discrimination, I mean that, you know, Latinas, we are the most adversely affected by the pay gap, by the gender pay gap. We earn 53 cents to every dollar that a non-Hispanic white man makes. And I'm hearing these statistics, I'm reading them, I'm understanding them in my own life, and I'm saying, I have to change this somehow. And if it means taking this big risk, I'm going to do it. Because I've had so many conversations with young women of color, many of them the mothers of my clients, who have literally pulled me to the side and said, thank you for helping my son. This is wonderful, thank you. But I am so proud of you for being a Puerto Rican woman and doing what you do. And I just took that as like a call to action and said, you know what, I have to use these skills that I have to set the stage so that other women can do the same thing. Because these issues can't persist. We have within us, I think, you know, women and men of color. We're marginalized people. We grow up with, you know, dealing with issues of poverty. But in poverty, there's a lot of resourcefulness. And those skills are readily transferable and translatable to business and entrepreneurship. And unfortunately, our kids are not getting those messages. And so I feel like in making this transition, it's not only to propel myself, but also to give an example to other people that they can see through their dreams, their goals, and their desires.
Well, I for one certainly applaud you, and I love to see and I love to hear about what you're doing. You know, I've you know, we've known each other for a while. I've watched you. I've been a part of panels in which you've spoken on so eloquently, and I think it's very important for our voices to be represented in many different ways, especially as it relates to changing the narrative in our communities. So, what would you say to someone who may have a choice between your law firm and another law firm? Why should they choose, you know, the law office of Jodi Morales?
Well, that's because the law office of Jodi Morales is more than just a full service law office. It really is a social justice lab, you know, working to animate a new kind of economy. I did not go into private practice or enter the commercial market solely for my own benefit. As I mentioned before, it really was to show community members that, you know, self-sufficiency and self-reliance and financial sustainability are there and ready for the taking.
Yes.
Okay. And, you know, the way in which I practice law is based on the values of inclusiveness, collaboration, equity, and respect for the community that's feeding me. And those values are prevalent not only in the governance of my office, the day-to-day operations, but also in my practice. And so when you come to me, what you're getting is not only an attorney who's knowledgeable, skillful, and ready to fight in court, you're getting a human being who has had struggles and strife, right? And who is compassionate and empathetic enough to really listen to what it is that you as the client wants. Because I think a lot of practitioners forget that they don't know everything, and what I think as a lawyer might not be the most important thing to you as the client. And so by really paying attention and coupling the empathy and the compassion with my practice, I am able to give my clients a unique experience. Not only are they getting a respected, you know, a knowledgeable lawyer, but they're getting a fearless Latina who has had these experiences that they've dealt with. And so that's what I would say is the big difference between my law office and the law office of someone else.
Well, you've heard it here first, folks. You have an advocate who's from the community, who represents the community with passion, with consistency, and with knowledge. And I think that that's very important. And I also think it's important for us to support our community. Oftentimes we have advocates, we have entrepreneurs, we have various people that are doing great work in the community, restaurant owners, and we go outside of the community and spend money in other places when we should certainly you know, focus on spending it in our community. So I really want to thank you, for being a part of the show today. You know, I was excited to have you on the show, and I'm so glad that you were able to fit it in your schedule. I know you have a lot of cases that you're currently working on. But any final thoughts to the viewers, you know, about any upcoming projects? And please let us know how we can get in contact with you, how we can, you know, we can hear about the work that you're doing, and also hear about any speaking engagements or anything that you have coming up.
So I invite everyone to come to my website, visit my website at www.jlmoraleslaw.com. You can also follow me on Instagram at jlmoraleslaw. And I really do just invite everyone to leverage my enterprise, my office, to really build community together. You know, whether it be building a like-minded business or using it as a platform for political engagement, or if you just need legal advice, I really do welcome everyone and anyone to come to me, call me, contact me, email me. I'm very accessible and interested in hearing what the community has to say.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we will definitely have your information in the description of this video. What are your thoughts about Miss Jodi Morales, Esquire? What are your thoughts about what she has to say about her journey? Please feel free to comment. And and I want to hear from those of us who are thinking about entering a career of law. You know, do you believe that you have what it takes as a result of what she's overcome? I'm certain that you do. So please follow your dreams, man. We need more attorneys. We need more judges. We need more senators, more congressmen, and congresswomen. So once again, this has been another episode of Voices. I'm your host, Keston Jones, signing off. Peace.